First of all, I'd like to thank you all for inviting me here. It's a great honour to be present here amongst you. And thank you. The last time I did anything with the Tolkien Society was at Aston University, which is in 2005. And I'd was only recently back from working on the Lord of the Rings films. And I had a great time. It was good. And I did a similar presentation. And I wasn't sure how many of you might have been there and whether I could get away with doing the same thing again. But I assume that most of you probably weren't. So what I decided to do was to basically pick up from where I left off at the end of that presentation. So that was, it was mainly work on the Lord of the Rings and a little bit of kind of a backstory as well. So this is the kind of part two, if you like. And this is kind of more or less the end of that particular project, because this was some artwork that I did for a DVD packaging for the extended editions of all the three films. I did up watercolor paintings which went onto the packaging. And this is it's pretty obvious what this scene is. They've just entered Moria, the Fellowship, and you can just see on the side of the door, you can see where it's the design from the back door of Moria, which is in half now because the door has been opened. So go to the next one. When I came back, I had a wonderful opportunity to illustrate another wonderful Tolkien book, The Children of Húrin. And this is Húrin's helmet, and this was used as a gold stamp on the binding of the book. This was potentially a cover for the book, but I think Christopher Tolkien felt it was kind of giving too much away almost. So that's Glaurung kind of crawling out of the Nargothrond. And so this was eventually used in a calendar. It didn't actually appear in the book itself. And this is a great moment from the Children of Húrin when they're arriving at the city of Gondolin. And one thing I love doing is working in pencil, and actually kind of using pencil work to kind of create chapter headings and chapter endings, and to kind of little kind of filling in vignettes in the book. So I did quite a few of those for the Children of Húrin. And I quite like this picture because we see the hero and the villain at the same time. Just the villain in that one. And yes, outlaws awaiting the arrival. I think Glaurung's on his way. And another book I did in that time was the Tales from the Perilous Realm, and this was the original cover. It was changed a little bit in the final print. They kind of enlarged the dragon, and this was used instead as a kind of end paper. Another dragon from Tales from the Perilous Realm. You might remember this one, a slightly more comical one. And this is illustration to Smith of Wootton Major. And a couple of actual spreads from the book. Nice opportunity to to illustrate that Oliphant poem again. And another great pleasure in that particular book is that we've got more about Tom Bombadil, who's a great favourite character of mine. So this is Tom meeting his first date with Goldberry when she surprises him by dragging him underwater. And that wonderful story, Leaf by Niggle. And I really like this image because it's kind of immediately obvious what it is, but it's a kind of mystery to it somehow. I don't know why I thought of doing it, but it's all about the whole, the macrocosm and the microcosm and the leaf. Yeah, yeah, the tree being within the leaf, as well as the other way around. And I also illustrated my own work. So I wrote this book called The Lord of the Rings Sketchbook, and this is one page from that volume. And that was taking illustrations that I'd done, sketches, working drawings, and doodles when I was actually illustrating the books, along with pictures from the film. And it's mainly pencil drawings with a few colour pieces in there. And at the same time, carrying on with my love of fairy. So this is just a kind of a anonymous fairy scribe, kind of taking notes and doing a detailed drawing of a miniature fairy. This one was for a book called Fairies, which is a book of scary fairy tales. And it's an anthology, a lot of contemporary writers of horror and kind of modern folklore. And all the stories take themes from fairy tales and folklore and kind of give them a new, more kind of gothic and horrific twist. So I really enjoyed doing the cover for that. And yeah, so that was my brief sojourn back in England. I was back for 4 years and kind of had a feeling that The Hobbit would happen at some time as a film. There seemed to be a lot of momentum behind it, although along with a lot of delays. And so I wasn't in a huge hurry to kind of to get back to New Zealand. I was quite enjoying my life back in England, but I thought this would crop up at some time, and I was, if I was going to be asked, then I would certainly have to go back and do it. And that's actually Bilbo Baggins. So it was a great pleasure to go back to New Zealand. One of the striking features, which is evident in the films as well as from anyone who's visited, is extraordinary landscapes. And having the opportunity to go on location records and actually explore this fantastic landscape was just brilliant. And also to be thinking about how we could use that in the films. We obviously filmed a lot in these places. There was some shooting done here, but more often it was actually used as material for building environments that we were going to create digitally. Buildings to create map paintings and actual kind of CG environments, because we would have to do a lot of that in this particular film. We were going to places that we didn't go to in The Lord of the Rings. And so that was exciting. We were going to explore some new areas. And probably the most important of those was the Lonely Mountain, Erebor and Dale. So we started to think about that at quite an early stage, and what were the landforms and how would it be used. And so we did a lot of drawings and plans, a lot of kind of maps. This is Dale, because we have this scene where kind of back in the past when Dale is destroyed, so it's in its heyday. So it's not part of the desolation, it's not a wilderness, it's actually a kind of a thriving, beautiful city. But whereas with the Lord of the Rings, everything that we, every city, every castle, almost every environment kind of involved miniatures. Even we had miniature forests, you know, we had miniature landscapes, but mainly we had the gorgeous miniatures of Minas Tirith and the fortresses of Sauron and Helm's Deep. And there was a great pleasure in actually being able to kind of go from drawings to making maquettes and then actually helping to build the miniatures. But with The Hobbit, we weren't going to go in that direction. It was all going to be CG because of the fact that it was going to be in 3D, which would make it really hard to do as miniatures. So the same structures, the buildings, the castles, the cities, would all have to be created by CG modelers and texture painters rather than people physically using their hands and glue and knives. So just honing down on what this environment is, and because Dale was going to be an important part of it, we spent a lot of time actually building Dale. And produced a lot of artwork in Photoshop. It's one of the features of working on the films is that Photoshop is kind of a ubiquitous tool of choice really for doing colour work, because it's so quick and immediate, and you can take photographic materials and create work that you can then show to the director and get very speedy feedback on. So this is getting close now to how Dale was going to be finally realised, and the look of the front of Erebor as well, and also beginning to think about Ravenhill. So we have these three kind of major builds in this one environment. And of course the interior of Erebor. So everything we had sets, but they were kind of minimal. This was the largest set, and it actually went up to about this point here, and then we have to design the rest of it. So often when you start a set, you're kind of making compromises and decisions, and knowing that somewhere further down the track you've got to make it all make sense. And trying to get the sense of the grandeur and the beauty of Erebor. And we wanted to do this shot where the camera was literally kind of diving down, it's panning across, and then diving down into this the depths of the city. It was important that you should feel that it's not a horizontal city. It's in a huge mountain which has a lot of kind of headspace, but also huge depths as well. And this is the throne room. So this is just a Photoshop painting of the throne room. And for these scenes, we just had they're just standing on the floor more or less, and we had this part built up to about there. And this is the artwork which helps to define what the rest of it will look like. And yeah, I was pretty happy with the way these scenes turned out. They managed to get really interesting lighting, and the texture of the colouring matched the sets that we built quite well. So that's the how it's shot against green screen, and that's the artwork for what the background should look like. And I did this drawing thinking about Dale and Erebor and their relationship, and I quite kind of randomly put this kite in there because there is a reference to Dale being a city which has a toy market, and so we were going to make that feature in some of the scenes in the actual set, but I thought, well, kites would be a really nice, kind of brilliant and colourful addition to that. And I made this into a dragon kite, and thinking that this could be the first intimation of the dragon attack. So you have this wonderful festive occasion with kites flying, and then suddenly a blast of flame. And Smaug appears. So this is him just bursting in through the front of Erebor. And then another Photoshop study of the same thing. And it's an immensely detailed build for the people actually creating this CG environment. So just giving them as much help as possible, and constantly working alongside them, so that it's actually quite a frustrating process, because I'm not a digital person. I'd like to get my hands onto something and kind of pull it around, and but instead you're kind of leaning over somebody's shoulder, looking what they're doing and kind of saying, could you move that bit there just a couple of centimetres over, and it's quite, you just kind of want to reach your hand into the computer and kind of move stuff around. And of course we've revisited Hobbiton, and this didn't actually end up in the film, but I thought, well, if we're going to make a few new buildings, why not make one of them a post office, which would be really useful. Especially as we've now lost in my little town in Devon, we've now lost our post office. So, yeah, a few scenes of life in Hobbiton. And then designing some fireworks. So the idea with this is that Gandalf is manipulating these fireworks. He sends up this kind of little sprite, a little kind of fire thing that whizzes around. And it's like a lure, and it's kind of chased by these big kind of firework creatures. And we're skipping forward a little bit here, but this is the troll cave. I didn't actually do much work on the trolls this time, but this was their cave where they find their weapons and a lot of other stuff beside. And another character that we meet is Radagast, and we don't know very much about him at all from the books. So it was quite interesting to have the opportunity to actually create this new character. Whether he should have been in The Hobbit or not, is another question. But he was there, so we're going to have fun with him. And the idea of him almost being like an environment for all these creatures that live in his hair and his beard and in his clothing. So he's a total kind of child of nature, and so we did a few variations. That's him with his hedgehog. And this is getting close to how he ended up, along with his house. And this is using little bits of Devonshire landscape, Devonshire trees. The idea with the house is that at some point, a few hundred years ago, a little kind of little acorn kind of fell into the foundations and started growing. And of course, he didn't want to do anything drastic. He just let the acorn kind of grow into an oak tree and slowly pushed the house apart, which is a nice way of just kind of telling us something about his attitude to nature and some of his possessions and his mode of transport, which is one of the wackiest ideas, I think, but somehow it worked. It was just a crazy thing. That, after a while, you just don't question it. You know? And then to Rivendell. This is artwork showing the Fellowship approaching Rivendell. Obviously, we wanted Rivendell to be recognisable as the same place, but in order to make it a little bit different, we had them coming in from a different direction, which meant that we could create some new buildings and make it look a little bit different, because we don't see all of Rivendell in the Lord of the Rings. So, lots of pencil drawings. I must stress that this is the barest kind of scratching of the amount of work that was done on these films. There were just thousands of drawings, and for any one scene or for any one environment, there will be just dozens and dozens of alternatives. So you're constantly doing drawings, showing them to Peter, getting his feedback, and you're just kind of developing it all together. It's a lovely creative process. And then when it's finally shot, you have a minimal set, which is just this kind of courtyard there, a couple of statues and some steps. And then the rest of it is painted in, and the models that we've created are placed and textured and painted. At one stage, we wanted to do something a little bit different with Elrond, and we thought, well, maybe he's into falconry. So we actually spent quite a bit of time thinking about this aviary, and there was going to be a conversation between Gandalf and Elrond, kind of walking through this strange environment, which would have been very, very striking, I think. And a few more colour pieces, just developing the whole environment. That fountain at the back there had another use for a very, very brief scene. I think it was just in the extended edition of the dwarves having a bit of a bath, yeah. And the council chamber for the scenes between Elrond and Saruman and Galadriel. And then they leave, and they leave from a slightly different route again. And they're in this environment. This is this is a composite of photographs that were taken on those location recces. And then having a bit of fun with the mountain giants. That was quite an interesting question. You know, what do they do when they're not actually kind of in the middle of thunderstorms and throwing rocks at each other? Are they just kind of sleeping, and do they kind of take the form of mountains? Does stuff grow on them? Do they have streams running over them? And now we're inside the mountain with the goblins. This is the Goblin King. And we decided that the goblins were, well, basically they would kind of raid outlying houses and traders, and they would kind of cart all their stuff inside the mountain. And so they create this very kind of ad hoc environment, just full of bits and pieces. And I thought it'd be nice for the Goblin King to have a throne which had actually been a wonderful kind of Baroque bed, and kind of broken in half and strapped to the side of this piece of rock. And I wanted to try and create these very sort of dynamic rock shapes, very kind of sharp and angular, but also eaten away and kind of poisonous. So that, again, we did a huge number of drawings kind of developing this theme. And here we can see an example of where they've just kind of gathered in bits of material, old carts and barrels, and they create this kind of, I think this is meant to be an inn, or a shop of some kind. And it should feel really mad, quite confusing and crazy and complex. This, thinking about Gollum and his little lake beneath the mountain, and wondering, he has a little vessel to kind of paddle himself around in. So we decided to make a coracle, and a coracle that's made of skin and bones and kind of anonymous bits and pieces. So that was fun. And this is that's a part of the set for the set extension. And then on the other side of the mountain, getting towards the climax of the film, with the wargs and Azog having chased the Fellowship to the edge of a cliff. And the Carrock. So again, this is with the view of the Lonely Mountain in the far distance. This is just artwork, which would then be handed on to the map painter, and which would be that much more developed. But we thought it'd be interesting to make the Carrock. We wanted it to have some kind of association with Beorn. So we thought perhaps it was a natural formation, but it just happened to kind of resemble a bear. And perhaps a little bit of extra work could make that resemblance a bit more kind of striking. And then now we're getting close to Beorn's house. I was working together with John Howe again, as we did in Lord of the Rings. And we both did a lot of work on Beorn and his house and his whole environment. And then quickly into Mirkwood. So Mirkwood was a very interesting, quite a difficult thing to do, because we built sets, but the sets didn't really give us that much. They would all need to be kind of extended, seriously extended. So a lot of the sets that we built were kind of almost replaced by CG trees. And this is the Black Stream. So you can see the set there, and I mean those trees are huge. They're sort of 25 feet tall, but they needed to be a lot taller. If you click on, so they would all be extended. And another magical moment in Mirkwood, when the deer appears. And then them just kind of journeying through. Pouring foul of the spiders. The Thranduil's palace in Mirkwood, again, a really interesting design process. We wanted to, it's obviously underground, but we wanted it to feel kind of, we wanted, you know, the elves' love of the forest should kind of carry on into that underground environment. So we used these kind of organic decorative elements and tree forms to actually make the interior of this cave feel as much like a vast ancient forest as possible. And obviously highly decorative. I was interested in taking natural things that happen in caves, natural kind of flows of build up of lime into interesting kind of textures and patterns, but then creating highly contrived sort of decorative elements out of them. So it's as if you had a stalagmite that was immensely sort of complex, and then you took those lines and kind of formalized them and extended them. And this was Thranduil's, pretty close to the final result of Thranduil's throne. And the cellars. Did an enormous number of drawings of this whole sequence of them, the dwarves escaping. And it was great fun to kind of plan it, and I actually did a sequence of drawings which kind of more or less covered the whole, about a mile of this river, essentially, and with things happening all the time. But I've just abbreviated that down to just a few pictures, just to give you an idea. There's one little nod there to the smelling of apples, because the barrels have been used. So it's like kind of William Tell element in there as well. And Dol Guldur was another extra environment that we were asked to design. And a classic kind of Gothic ruin, like a haunted Gothic ruin. and combining ancient trees and partially collapsed fortresses. And when you start to design something like this, you're not actually quite sure what's going to happen there. So you're trying to create a place which will have as many possibilities for the director to kind of find the things, the action that he wants to kind of take place there. So you're trying to give as many options as possible. So it was actually a very kind of flexible structure that we built. This is Gandalf finding his way into the middle. The original idea was that the fortress would be almost invisible because of the amount of growth on it, so that Gandalf would kind of wander in and discover almost that he's in this fortress, because it's kind of, the trees have just kind of overgrown everything. But we ended up making the fortress more kind of striking to give it a better profile. If you do the next one. So that's just taking a scene as was shot and adding a Photoshop background. So Gandalf wandering around this environment. This was, there was going to be quite a highly developed escape scene at one time from Dol Guldur, utilising this kind of broken away back half of the city, and so this was a view from the back, which we don't really see very much of this in the film. And then using those same environments that from our location shoots to actually design the shots of Azog's army marching towards the Lonely Mountain. Given different options on how they move across the country. And then skipping over to Lake Town. This was one of the biggest builds that we had. But what we did with this, which was really useful, was that we built art department models for all the buildings. Not all the buildings, but a great number of them, which made the CG creation of these structures so much easier. So we had very high quality little models that then could be developed. And this is the Master's Hall. And that's using part of the miniature that we made and extending that. And the interior of the Master's Hall, which should feel like a really kind of shabby town council sort of environment, and everything's kind of sinking into the water. All the timbers are kind of damp and bending. And but this was one of my favourite sets because it was just dressed so beautifully. It was finished very beautifully. Stephen Fry actually loved being on that set as well. He thought it was one of the best sets that he'd actually been on. And speaking of which, this is one of my tasks. Having done a design for the Master's bedroom, was to I put a portrait of him, a little drawing of a portrait on the wall, and Peter loved that idea. So actually did we kind of developed that. So took a photograph of him in his costume and then turned it into a canvas. Essentially finished the photograph in Photoshop, added the beard and and the hair, changed the shape a little bit, added the background. We got that printed onto canvas and then covered it with a kind of a gel which gives you the texture of brush strokes, and then painted on top of that in acrylics. So what you're actually seeing on the final thing is mostly paint, but it's kind of on top of this photograph. And then more coats of varnish. And the whole thing was very striking. And then we're arriving in back to Dale and Erebor. So this is Dale in its ruined state. And heading up towards the back door. And there's this idea for the pathway up to the secret door to be kind of hidden. And I'm not sure who, somewhere along the line, the idea of there being a statue with a kind of a secret pathway kind of built into it came up. And then I did this, I thought of the actual pattern on part of the statue being able to be utilized as a weird kind of stairway. So, and and it worked. They got up there. And back in Dale, this is one of our sets, and how it was developed. And again, back into the interior of Erebor. This is just a Photoshop. And imagining all the things that could happen when the dwarves encounter the dragon. So this was a study of Bilbo just being kind of frozen as he sees the dragon's eye opening in a gleam of light. And we built up to there as a set, and we just had an amount of kind of treasure around it, and we had a few other elements, and then built up the rest of the environment from there. Again, a very long process, a lot of kind of toing and froing, and getting feedback from Peter, a lot of changes. And then being chased by the dragon. So one of the I really like kind of working on Erebor. We had this kind of notion when we were doing more in the first films that all the dwarvish design should be geometric and kind of crystalline in structure, and it's all straight lines and angles. There are no curves, and it works so well that we continued that idea in Erebor, and that also continues through into their armor and their weapons, and it really helps to kind of distinguish them as a kind of culture. And then thinking about what would actually happen in this battle. So they'll be fighting in Dale, and would we use creatures like trolls as a kind of siege machines? And the bats, would they be little bats, millions and billions of little bats, or would they be slightly bigger? and able to kind of pluck their enemies off ramparts and kind of drop them, and just to be more formidable. And this was something that kind of ended up more or less in the film, but the idea of this broken statue, which is what is used to dam the river, to actually kind of block off the, to increase the defences, to block off the Erebor, create a moat. And then staging this kind of battle around it. And then going back a little bit wider, and this is one of the advantages of Photoshop, is that you can do that. You can do a drawing and scan it and work it up, and then you can actually track back and expand on it very easily without having to kind of glue extra pieces of paper on the edge. And just a few more things, a couple of moments from the battle, just really for examples of how we're using elements from those landscapes to kind of dress the CG environments. As they make their way up towards Ravenhill. That's them, very, very small, just making their way up to the towards Ravenhill. Now, the process of designing Ravenhill was very, very complex again, because we didn't quite know what was going to happen there. We wouldn't really know what was going to happen until all the Previs had been done. So we needed a model that a Previs model is a fairly simple and easily animatable model that's used to kind of storyboard the scenes. Storyboards are very, very rare now. Previs has become so sophisticated that it's really a lot easier to actually create it in CG, create the action, and then you can move your camera to any point, and you can kind of, you can be, you know, the DP choosing the moment of the action and the actual kind of camera angle. So so that process is going on alongside actually kind of developing the design, and so we need to keep on feeding through what we're doing to Previs and seeing what they're doing and making that adapt our idea of what the structure needs to do. So at any one time there are really three kind of virtual models. There's the one in your head and on the drawings, and there's the Previs model, and then there's the finished model, which is being built at the same time, taking the Previs model and kind of working it up. And then the shapes are kind of gradually getting finalised, and we're getting feedback from Peter and finding out more about the action and what needs to happen. So we had two sets that were filmed for all the action in Ravenhill. They're not very big sets either. So we had to create a model that incorporated elements from those two sets so that you could just kind of extend very easily. But also those sets were used for multiple purposes. So you'd have scenes which were meant to be happening in different parts of the structure being shot on the same piece of set, but just with the camera in a slightly different position. So it was quite complex actually making it all work as one kind of finished structure. But the mist and the snow and the atmosphere. It really helped to give it this very kind of creepy, but and also quite kind of shifting and intangible feel. Especially with torchlight glowing in the ruins. And then another little thing that has to happen is that this tower collapses and becomes a little arena for a fight between Legolas and Bolg. And this is a typical shot that you would see on happening every day. So you take that and see how you can make it look. And this is getting close to the end now. This is the burial of Thorin and Filion-Killy. And descending into the very kind of bowels of Erebor, to the very roots of the mountain. And but also making it into a great kind of ceremonial space. And a little bit of light relief at the end. This is we have most of the crew and people involved in the films at some point are asked to do little cameos. So there's John Howe and myself, Lake Town musicians. So I designed that instrument, unfortunately, and but it was made like plumbing. It was made of solid lead, so it was very. Now this is a little experiment that was done quite an early stage in the film. I wanted to try and work out how far you could take makeup with the idea that you could enlarge the face by enlarging some of the features, but keep some of its real skin, so you weren't just kind of covering the actor completely in latex. So John and I both did. He did one of himself, and I did this. So we showed it to Peter, and he enjoyed the general principle, and I think he thought it was a valid idea, and you can flick back and forth if you like. But you can see how it kind of actually enlarges the whole head. And then he got Weta Workshop to do the same thing with the actors and various extras as well, to see whether the process would work. And that's the end of that little presentation. So. Yeah. So if there are any questions. Encore. Hello. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, John, for such a visual feast.
No, John did great work as well. Yeah.
Visual feast.
Yeah.
I'm going to shoot myself just now.
Sorry, John is my middle name. That's fine.
The question I wanted to ask was, the two films, Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, I think we probably all agree. The first film was far more enmeshed in real landscape and real actors and real costumes and real makeup, and the second film was more green screen and CGI.
Yeah.
How did you adapt or work with your conceptual artwork to fit those quite two different frames his reference?
Yeah, there was a striking difference for me because I really like working with physical things. I like to draw with pencil, and I like to sculpt with clay and plasticine, and so on the Lord of the Rings, basically most of what we built, as far as the cities and the environments go, we had miniatures as a strong or major element, which gives limitations for the director, because you've kind of got to make up your mind at a pretty early stage what those shots are. Because the preparation, the amount of time that it takes to actually build the miniatures and to shoot them, they need to be shot in multiple passes. And for the whole of the 6 years that we were working on those films, the miniatures unit was working all the way through. So all those miniatures were shot over a period of 6 years. So in pre-production almost, and right through to the end. So it's very complex. And now with the tools that Peter has now, and that modern filmmakers have, they can actually get inside those CG environments in a way that they can't with a miniature. You can build the CG environment, and then you can enter it. For the last year or so on the Hobbit, Peter was actually working more or less in virtual reality. So you have these scenes inside his camera, essentially. So he's moving around in the studio with a camera in this kind of virtual world, getting exactly the camera angles that he wants in order to be able to tell the story. So for him and for the animators, it's a fantastic tool. For me, it's not quite as satisfying because I can't quite get to grips with that CG environment. It's a skill that I don't have, and I really like film. I really like the quality of filmed real objects, even if they're the miniatures. The fact that they're on film makes them real. They are real. So it's a balancing thing, really. You've gained flexibility, but I think you've lost a little bit of something else.
Trevor was next.
Yeah.
I really like your pictures, your drawings of Radagast. Did you know that Sylvester, at the time we were making those drawings, did you know that Sylvester McCoy had been cast, or was that independent?
I think that came along kind of halfway through. I think at the beginning, when we started doing the drawings, we didn't know. And then the name kind of cropped up. So obviously started looking at his face and kind of adapting it. I think that was true. That was true of quite a lot of the actors as well. We started off not knowing who all the dwarves were going to be, not knowing who Beorn was going to be. So. Hi.
I love your illustration at the end. Shows how you take kind of reality and then it becomes amplified into, taking a face and then amplifying it into something fantastical.
Yeah.
But I'm really interested in the opposite process of your fairies and your creatures that maybe don't even have a basis in words, that just come through your pencil. Please tell us about that. They are real. Please tell us they're real.
Of course they're real. Of course they're real. Well, although I guess I am a kind of a fantasy illustrator, I don't really think of myself as dealing in fantasy. For me, it's these are all creatures, whether they're real or not. They've been with us for thousands of years. They've been part of our imagination, part of our history. In a way, they're as important as our real history in some ways, because they're part of the history of our imagination, history of our fears and dreams and desires. And so I'm constantly kind of drawn to that world. I think that's it's just endlessly rich, and trying to make it as real as possible without making it kind of mundane or it's always a balancing act. You always kind of
Sorry, I was trying to make it audible. If you speak a bit louder, I won't turn it up so far.
Okay, right. Yes, every drawing is two things, isn't it? It's what it's representing and what it is on the page. And if it becomes too strongly representational, it starts to lose some of the kind of intangible aspects that really make it special. So I like to work in a very light way and then just kind of gradually build up and know when to stop. And try not to use photographs as much as possible, because I think that photographs kind of kill drawing in a way. I think if you can use your visual memory and look at photographs but never really quite copy them, because you won't ever get past that the fact that it's just a copy of a photograph. So it's kind of studying anatomy and constantly drawing people around you, and then feeding that into the imagination. So drawing from life and drawing from the imagination, alternately almost. They kind of feed one another.
Alan, before we take Irina's question,
Yeah.
can I ask you, could you speak up a little more, as if you were talking to me now across the room? As if we were having a conversation.
Okay.
I think the microphone and the speakers aren't working in our favour here.
Oh, okay.
So just speak up a little.
Yeah.
I know it's,
I'll do my best. Okay, how's that?
that's to you and John,
Yeah.
how both being very quiet people.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Irina, you have the next question.
Hi, Irina.
Question. Can you tell us what you're working on now? Have we got something to look forward to? Is it a new project of some sort?
Well, I hope you've got something to look forward to. Yes. I've been back now for just about a year, and I didn't want to kind of get into another big deadline. I was trying to avoid that, and I have managed to avoid that so far. But I'm doing a few kind of odds and ends for Warner Brothers connected with the films and forthcoming DVDs and stuff like that. So bits of design work, bits of packaging. And but I've also been writing. I've been developing some stories, things that I've been thinking about for a long time, and I've kind of got to the point where I know if I don't actually do it now, then I probably won't get around to it. Yeah. So and landscape drawing and painting, getting back into the English landscapes. Hello.
I suppose I have two questions.
Yeah.
The first is, given that there were the two of you working on the films, how did they choose? I mean, did you both draw the same thing and then they chose whatever they liked best, or did you pick what you liked best? Do you prefer landscape to people, or do you prefer your favourite location, or what is it?
That's a really interesting question. It's a little bit different on the Lord of the Rings, because Peter had ideas about what each of us should be doing, and so he thought that John would be great at doing some of the Mordor stuff, and he thought I would be good at doing Rivendell. And obviously we were swapping over and doing the same things, and working alongside each other. And but we did manage to kind of compartmentalise quite well. It's a bit more of a free-for-all on the Hobbit. So a lot of the time we were working on the same things. And then one of us would kind of gradually sort of start to drift away and do other stuff, or one of us would sort of get a bit stronger and get a stronger line. So it was very organic. You know, I think we all worked on everything, essentially. And you know, as I said, we did produce thousands of drawings, probably more drawings than we can justify by our, you know, you know, the amount of it that actually kind of was finally in the finished film. But yeah, we were drawing continually for 6 years.
Elena had a second question, and Amanda had a question. So.
Yeah.
Should we go Amanda first and then Elena again?
Yeah.
And you've really shaped how the world visualised Tolkien's world. How do you kind of cope with that?
I don't agree. I think Tolkien shaped how people see Tolkien's world, really.
Yes, that's true. But since then, people have seen it visually, and then that's how they see it now.
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I always had the feeling that books and films are so separate that the one doesn't kind of carry on over into the other, that we'd be able to enjoy a film representation of a character. Then when you go back to the book, you're back with a fictional character. But now, I'm not so sure in that, for example, Ian McKellen's Gandalf was such a strong and definitive character that I think, you know, when I'm reading Tolkien, I'm actually hearing Ian McKellen's voice, which is not a bad thing at all. But yeah, it's an interesting question, right?
It's really cosmic, really. But even before that, when you did the calendars, as I said, I was growing up, and I encountered the calendars even before I read the books. And those pictures were in my mind when I read the books.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say thank you very much, because they are truly, truly incredible, and true to Tolkien.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, I do try to. Yeah, I do try not to kind of impose too much on the text. I think my drawings are kind of vague enough that I mean, I think if I did them in acrylics or oil or something, they'd be more kind of solid and tangible and more problematic in a strange way. I think the fact that they're in watercolour, they're slightly kind of yeah. I think that kind of helps, really.
And so it's Elena and then Rob at the back. Elena?
I did your 2 parts.
You said you had two at once, was it?
Oh.
2 parts.
Alan, hi.
Hi.
Sorry, I was wondering because you were talking there a lot about like you've done a mixture of you've got where there's like pencil drawing and there's a lot of digital as well, like Photoshop.
Yeah.
Things like that. Having worked with artist John Cockshaw, who does a lot of interesting stuff with digital artwork. It seems almost with the digital coming in that it becomes in some ways easier to create stunning images. I mean, do you see that one is diluting that with, you know, advances in technology? Do you see it that it's maybe diluting artwork as you see it and how you came into it originally, or is it just different?
I think it is different. You know, there's some very original, very striking artists now working digitally. But I think in the beginning it was tending to make people all look kind of the same. I think it was quite hard to actually distinguish who'd painted what in digital media, because there's some kind of there's something in the actual kind of marks, the brush strokes or the pencil lines, which is your kind of signature in a way, your autograph, and that disappears a bit. But I think that is changing because people are creating their own brushes, and I'm seeing a lot more very distinctive work which is created entirely digitally.
I like painting sometimes it's more photorealistic than actual digital stuff.
Yeah. I think I'll always stick with kind of traditional media mainly. I just don't think I've quite got the confidence, for one thing, to kind of throw myself into competition with these kind of whiz kids.
Please don't.
So, yeah, I think that covers it.
Alan, we've got a question going back with Viv as well.
Hi.
Earlier on in your presentation, you showed the picture of the kites,
Yeah.
and you said you had the idea of making it into a dragon,
Yeah.
and took that to Peter. I think that's what you said.
Yeah.
What you thought. How much input did you have, your ideas? How many did Peter say, yeah, that's great, Alan, we'll do that, or no, that's not how I see it?
Well, I like to think I had quite a positive impact. But yeah, Peter doesn't always kind of say, "Oh, yeah, that's great." If he just kind of looks happy or smiles, you kind of know that you've worked your way in there. But also, it's important to be quite kind of laid back and not to try and sell your ideas to Peter or to. I think generally, if you kind of push your idea too strongly, you set up a little bit of a defensive thing, So it's more like you feed in very subtly little ideas. You can just do the drawing and just kind of show it, and you kind of watch his mind actually have the idea. It's quite a subtle thing. Yeah.
So the next up was Harry over there, by the door.
Hi.
I was just thinking, obviously you said you've done thousands of illustration. I was wondering if there was any in particular character or location that you particularly found hard to put to paper. If you maybe had a sort of idea as to what it was going to look like, and then maybe midway through a drawing you kind of thought, actually no, that's not how I want it to be. And if so, like, what did you kind of find most challenging from it?
Yeah, again, that's another interesting question. I think there's a tendency in me probably to kind of stick with an idea and kind of hang on to it a little bit, even if it's not really gaining much purchase with anybody else. That's probably just a very, very human thing. There's potential there, and you want to kind of bring it out, and but other people have kind of moved on. I think for me the most difficult things are often ideas which have been started by somebody else, which you're then asked to sort of to develop, and that can require a bit of a kind of shift in your thinking. It's certain kind of creatures that I find really hard to draw, purely because they've been designed by somebody else. And that's probably just a result of spending the last 40 years mainly by myself in my studio. And but the whole process of collaborating and working with a lot of other artists is very, very, very fruitful. And also kind of pushing yourself to do stuff that's slightly outside your experience, or makes you outside your comfort zone. So it's always good to kind of push yourself, I think.
I think I'm the only person who wants to ask a question. It's me and Elena.
Following on from that question,
Yeah.
your favourite ones to draw, or maybe top 3?
Favourite things to draw?
Yeah, or locations, or characters, or what could you draw forever?
Trees. Trees. Well, just nature generally, rocks, trees. I'll always draw people. It's not my kind of. It's not my strength. I think I'm kind of better at landscapes and atmospheres. But the area that I live in Dartmoor, just contains so much extraordinary, beautiful trees and rocks and moss-covered waterfalls, and I could just be quite happy just kind of drawing all of that forever.
Alan,
Yeah.
you've done The Hobbit, you've illustrated The Hobbit, you've illustrated The Lord of the Rings, you've illustrated Children of Hearing. Is there anything else from Tolkien you really love to get to grips with, apart from like the short stories with the Previs Realms work
Yeah.
you've already done? Something like Silmarillion or...
Yeah. Yeah.
And can we tease a concrete answer out?
No, but I mean, I would love to, not to take on the whole thing, but maybe just take one story or some element.
Story.
I don't know. You can suggest if you can suggest
Which
anything.
story?
Because you've done Hearing, but what about his brother, Tuor and Goblin? Did that grab you at all?
Don't know. Does it have a happy ending? Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to kind of speculate about it, but obviously I would like to do more work with Tolkien and his.
I'd like to do more.
Yeah.
Maybe you have a question?
A tiny one,
Yeah.
Alan. Guess it might be. Maybe one day we might interest you in coming up to Staffordshire, because we have, I think, Tolkien's original Ents in the forest at Carrock Chase.
Oh yeah.
Oak trees, and it would be so magical if you ever came up to Staffordshire. Please come and visit us and
Oh
enjoy the
yeah.
Ents.
I hadn't heard of that. Are they just very, very ancient trees?
So you are so welcome. It would be good to have you up there.
Okay, sounds good.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
If Peter phoned you up tomorrow
And said, where were you last night?
and he said, I'm doing 27 films out the Silmarillion, what would you say?
I said, call me when you've got the rights.
Thank you.
Very good. As a token of our appreciation to you, we would like to give you the highest honour the Society can bestow. That is a gold badge and honorary membership of the Society.
Oh, wow. Oh, beautiful.